You may already be using Azure or exploring the possibility of doing so, and I'm going to talk about extending the management capabilities provided by Azure into your on-premise infrastructure. And we'll focus on this instance on vSphere infrastructure. Microsoft are rapidly expanding the capabilities of Azure Arc for management of various on-premise infrastructure and platforms, and I'll be demonstrating the process for implementing Azure Arc-enabled VMware vSphere. Once enabled, this is going to project vSphere resources located at your private cloud or on-premise infrastructure into the management portal of Azure, from where administrators can perform tasks, including creating, modifying, and deleting virtual machines. Role-based access control can be leveraged to grant specific users such as app teams or developers the ability to self-provision virtual machines on your private vSphere infrastructure, but do so entirely from the Azure Management Portal. Once the environment is Arc-enabled, there is a vast array of capabilities provided on the Azure public cloud that you can integrate with or use in conjunction with your on-premise infrastructure. I'll be going on to cover some of these capabilities in future videos, but would include update management, ensuring compliance, and enabling self-service for developers, just to mention a few. The construct of your vSphere environment doesn't matter in terms of Arc enabling it, meaning you could be using a hyper-converged platform such as VxRail, or you could have a 3-tier environment with separate compute, networking, and storage. Either way, you can still benefit from the use of Azure Arc with vSphere. To implement this, you would need to deploy a resource bridge, which is a virtual machine that will facilitate the communication between Azure and VMware's vCenter. Once that's deployed, and you've registered vCenter with Azure, you'll be able to see all the resources from the vSphere infrastructure projected into the Azure Management Portal. This includes virtual machines along with other resources that you can then selectively enable Azure to manage. Say you want to create a new virtual machine on your vSphere environment, then you can simply click Add and follow a wizard that provides the same user experience as you have when you provision a virtual machine into Azure's public cloud. However, Azure is instead orchestrating the creation of that virtual machine on your private vSphere infrastructure. This is done without you needing to touch or even open any VMware admin tools. Once provisioned, you'll have a new VMware virtual machine that can be managed in the Azure portal, and additional services, functions, and integrations can be enabled for it that are provided from the Azure public cloud. So, I'm now going to demonstrate the creation of the resource bridge in an existing vSphere environment, with which I will then register vCenter in Azure. Then from the Azure Management Portal, I'll explore the resources that vCenter is managing, as well as creating and deleting a virtual machine on the vSphere infrastructure. So let's get started. Here I've logged into a vCenter instance running locally, which is managing on-prem VMware environment where I can see virtual machines already provisioned. I'm also using a template for creation of the virtual machines locally. So I'd like to make the vCenter and all its associated resources available in the Azure portal, from where I can then manage and provision new virtual machines and services. I would also like to be able to provision from templates like is done in vCenter. We'll begin by logging into the Azure public portal and browsing to Azure Arc, Services, and then VMware vCenters. I'm going to select Add and Create New Resource Bridge, which is something that is deployed as a virtual machine on the local infrastructure and will become a facilitator for communication between vCenter and Azure. We need to identify a meaningful name for it, as well as selecting the subscription and the resource group to which it itself will be associated as a resource, along with the region for their metadata. After identifying a location name, in my case DC1, as well as the name by which the new vCenter will be displayed in Azure, we're then ready to progress. It is recommended to add tags to resources for the purpose of management and reporting later on, which I'm going to skip in this instance. So now there is a script prepared, which I can download and execute locally, which will deploy the new resource bridge, as well as registering itself and vCenter in Azure. So the script will prompt for details of the vCenter that will be used to deploy the new resource bridge virtual machine, along with the credentials to authenticate to it. Then we are prompted to select options that tailor the configuration of the new resource bridge virtual machine, including, for example, the data store, network, etc. that will be used when the VM is created. The script will in a few moments download a template file that will be used for the deployment of the new Resource Bridge VM, so you'll be prompted to provide a name for the template file. And finally, you'll be asked to provide an IP address that would be used by the Resource Bridge virtual machine once it is deployed. After a short while, the template for creation of the Resource Bridge will have been downloaded and would have been used to create the new Resource Bridge virtual machine, which in turn would have been powered on. The services are then configured on it automatically that will be used to facilitate the communication between vCenter and Azure. When the script finishes, the registration of both the Resource Bridge and vCenter will have been complete, and we can now see vCenter DC1 in the Azure portal. Opening vCenter DC1 allows us to see the resources it is managing, including virtual machines already provisioned. These would initially appear just as a basic list of names and attributes, but as you'll see, some look like the names have hyperlinks. That's because these VMs have been enabled for management by Azure. I have already selected VMs and clicked the Enable in Azure option at the top. Additionally, I also selected Enable Guest Management, which then surfaces up the VM within Azure as an Azure Arc virtual machine. This enables even more options for management of the virtual machine, including, for instance, update management to enforce patching of virtual machines with the latest security updates as and when they become available. We also need to enable the management or use of other resources such as hosts and clusters. I would like to leverage an existing template already residing on the VMware environment locally for creation of a new virtual machine, so I need to enable the template too, which I've already done. Likewise, I would like to enable the use of virtual machine networks for the purpose of attaching new VMs to. And lastly, when reviewing data stores, I notice I've not enabled any yet, so I'll enable one right now for the purpose of provisioning a new virtual machine too. So I've enabled all resources that are necessary for me to create a new virtual machine. So I'm going to browse to Azure Arc Virtual Machines to provision a new one. So we can see here other virtual machines that have already been Arc-enabled. Now selecting one of those virtual machines lets us see a variety of information about the virtual machine, but in particular lets us perform operations on it, including enabling management and compliance policies or enabling change tracking for operations performed on or within the virtual machine. It's also possible to enable extensions of the virtual or for the virtual machine, which are like small apps that provide other functions such as installation of antivirus protection or also provide the ability to run a script inside of the virtual machine. So continuing on again with the creation of a new virtual machine within our vSphere environment, we'll select Create and specify a resource group to which the new virtual machine resource will be associated in Azure. We'll provide a name for the virtual machine. The DC1 location is pre-populated and you will see a virtual machine kind is already populated with VMware. We'll select the cluster to which the new VM will be deployed, along with the data store. There is the VMware template residing on the local vSphere host that a new VM will be created from. Lastly, we will specify credentials that will be used for the local administrator account within the VM once it is created. Then we have the chance to tailor the further options for the new virtual machine if we wish, such as its virtual disks or its networking interfaces. Again, adding tags is highly beneficial, but I'll skip it in this instance. And then click Create to begin the creation of the new virtual machine. So the creation of this virtual machine is being orchestrated entirely by Azure. There is no need for us to go anywhere near our VMware tools locally, but hey, I'm just curious to see what it looks like in terms of what's happening, so let's go and have a look. If we switch to vCenter and scroll down the inventory, we can then see dummy VM1, and it indicates at the bottom the clone of the virtual machine from template is still in progress. After a short while though, we'll have the confirmation that the deployment is complete, and here is the resource shown in the Azure portal for our new Azure Arc virtual machine that was created on our local vSphere infrastructure. So, once the infrastructure, our virtual machines, or other platforms are Arc-enabled, then there's a ton of other services and functions in Azure that can be used with those resources. I'll be exploring those in other videos. But for now, I'm finished with this virtual machine, so I'll go ahead and delete it. I'll simply select Delete and confirm I want to proceed, then after a few moments, Azure will provide a confirmation that the VM is deleted. Again, Switching to the vCenter management GUI, we can no longer see the VM in the inventory, and there's a confirmation of the deletion task having completed. This was a short overview of how to implement Arc for vSphere, and I'll be going on to explore other features and capabilities that this will then facilitate, like further automation, orchestration, monitoring, update management, compliance policies, and implementing self-service, etc. I have one question for you. What would you like to use Arc to enable in your vSphere environment? Please feel free to share an answer in the comments section. I hope this overview was helpful, and thank you for watching.